Maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this.
So I've been working in behavioral health and human services for 20 years, and my area of focus has been individuals who have severe and persistent mental illness. As I started working in Georgia, I just migrated into working in the housing, supportive housing, and so I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And back in 2012, I was working as the director of residential services for a local community service board. We had 40 apartments that were in a complex, and we got word one day that the complex was not going to renew any of our leases. The owner had changed, and the new owners really weren't interested in supportive housing. They wanted to do strictly market rentals. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who was an executive director of a nonprofit here in town and asked her if she knew of any resources for finding multiple units really quickly. And she said, funny enough, we're co-sponsoring a program called Open Doors. I needed 42 units at the time, and they were able to start a search, and within 1 month we had all 42 units. We had leases signed, and we started a transition plan. And so I was really impressed with just how quickly they were able to find exactly what we needed, the geography that we wanted, and units that our clients were really comfortable in and were willing to call home. So about a year later, it's just a natural next step in the evolution of my development and my career. And so I've been with Open Doors now for a little over a year and a half as the director. For me, it's being able to take what I've learned working in supportive housing as a clinical social worker and a manager of nonprofit work, and help other nonprofits be able to find housing and get folks linked into that housing as quickly as possible.
The apartments that they find, what kinds of things are special that they need?
Well, I think that's the unique concept of Open Doors. Is what we do is we enter into agreements with the management companies and the ownership groups, and one of the biggest needs is reduced barriers to housing. The top 4 barriers that our population experiences, and this is probably universal across the country, would be their income doesn't meet the income to rent threshold each month. They have a lot of evictions maybe in their record. They have poor credit, or they've been convicted of crimes. What we find is that individuals, if they apply just through the general procedures that the market would apply, they get denied. What we've also seen is rents have gone up dramatically over the last year, anywhere from 15 to 25%. And so what we do is we act as an intermediary. We partner with the management companies, and we negotiate down those barriers and say, if we work with the absolute best nonprofits, best in class, the ones who are going to place individuals and families and be a part of their lives and make sure that they're stably housed, then you work with us and we provide a second layer of support for those placements, and that way that enables you as a management company to lower those barriers and to possibly even reduce rent to make it more affordable. We partner with those management companies, we partner with the nonprofits, and then the way I describe it is we act as kind of like a dating service like Match.com. We bring them together when there's a good fit. What we're able to do is really help families and individuals and veterans who are ready to exit homelessness to be able to find exactly the apartment they want, where they want it, with the terms that are going to be able to be affordable to them, and get into that unit without having those denials.
If a region wanted to get started with this, what would they do first?
First step would be to find an ally in the real estate market, to find an executive, someone who has contacts, but equally as important, somebody who has that heart and that passion for really digging in and working hard to help individuals and families exit homelessness. So what's made us so successful is the Real Estate Collaborative have really reached out to their colleagues and said, look, we have this great program, it puts protections in place for you, so partner with us, sign an agreement through a Memorandum of Understanding, which basically outlines what we're asking of them as a company and what we bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so our model basically is our board makes those connections. We identify those companies who have affordable properties in their portfolio or who might be willing to reduce rent to make them affordable. Yeah. And we have a lunch. We sit down and we talk with them. And our strategy is a little bit different from traditional nonprofits in that it's as important to us to find housing for folks who need housing, but also to really serve the companies we partner with to make sure that they meet their bottom line, that they get paid at the end of the day because they're our bread and butter. Yeah. And so we want to make them happy and bring them good residents that are going to be good neighbors and pay their rent on time. And that's really what the memorandum, the MOU, outlines is if they're willing to lower those barriers, which we talked about before, then we're going to bring them solid agencies with individuals and families who are wanting and ready to be housed, that they're going to pay their rent on time. And once we execute those agreements, then we start listing those apartments and tracking those vacancies within our portfolio. Yeah. We communicate that to all of our, right now it's close to 50 nonprofit partners. Those are private agencies, those are local government, housing authorities. Yeah. And we make that inventory available to them in real time. We actually have developed a housing location app with one of our partners, RentPath, where a case manager can pull up an inventory on their phone and make an application for that unit through us through their iPhone. We also get property partners who will come to us and say, we just renovated a building, we've got 100 units that we need to lease within the next 60 days. And so we send out email blasts to our partner agencies and say, hey, we've got all these available units. Anybody interested? There's 2 bedrooms at this price point. And so it's really kind of keeping that communication moving from the properties to the nonprofits. Likewise, our nonprofit partners can come to us and say, hey, we just got a new permanent supportive housing grant where we need to find 20 2-bedroom units within this geography at this price point. And so we'll send out a blast to all of our property partners and see who's interested. Our turnaround time for both of those types of campaigns are usually 72 hours. So if there's an availability, we get applications in there within 2 or 3 days. And if there's a need, we can usually find a complex that can serve that need within 2 or 3 days.
Wow. Do you have a surplus of places usually, or are you playing catch up with what's the...
Yeah, the demand is always outpacing the supply. And so, like you talked about, we're coming close to having a substantial shortage in affordable housing. And so part of our strategy is not only working with our affordable housing inventory, but also working with complexes to do set-asides. So maybe taking 5 or 10 units in a higher tier complex and getting them to lower their rents to under the fair market rental rate.
So what would the motivation be for them to lower the rents in those units?
So they might have, at that given complex, they may have a vacancy rate of maybe 15 to 20%. So, 80 to 85% of their units are occupied. They really want to get up to that sweet spot of 96, 97% occupied. And so what we can do is say, okay, if you lower those rents for the set-asides, some revenue coming in is better than none. And you also are working with an agency that's guaranteeing payment of that rent. But also we appeal to their altruistic side. This is a good thing. You've got availability, you've got vacancy, we have need. Help us, put a dent in the homeless population by making these units available and giving people an opportunity to get housed.
What kind of providers do you work with, and how do you make sure that everybody's happy in this?
The nonprofits or the providers on the other side of the coin from our property partners are mostly private nonprofits who specialize in housing services or housing location. Many of them have grants through local continuums of care, our local state government that focus on rapid rehousing. We also have a handful of public nonprofits. We work with a lot of veterans groups. All of those combined, we have a little over 50 partners, including housing authorities, local government, state government. We also work with the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. We serve them based on their program structure. So, for instance, we have a lot of nonprofit groups that have permanent supportive housing grants where they actually need to be the leaseholders. So we'll support them executing a master lease with the apartment complex. And then with rapid rehousing, those leases are in the individual's names, just like voucher programs, Section 8, housing choice vouchers. Each program tends to be different, have its own requirements, and so we help really kind of understand those programs and then educate our property partners on how those programs work. Who's going to pay the rent? Is it going to be from an agency or housing authority? What percentage is going to come from the household? When is that going to titrate over completely to that household covering 100% of the rent? And then also really vetting those agencies before we make referrals to those properties. So making sure that they're financially solvent, that they've got good fiscal practices, they've got solid case management strategies. One of the benefits of me being in this role is that I've worked those programs. I've managed pretty much every HUD grant under the sun, and so I know what to look for as far as really solid case management approach to make sure that they're in good standing with the local COC. They've got a good reputation in the community. And if they pass that litmus test, then we can work with them and then sell them to the property partners and say, these are great agencies. We vetted them, they're solid, they're going to provide good services, they're going to be a good partner with you. So we execute a memorandum of understanding both with our property partners and our provider partners. And it's basically just an agreement that says, if you bring this to the table, we'll bring this to the table. So on the property side, if they're willing to work with us on those barriers, lower those acceptance requirements, if they're willing to work with us on rent, if they will come to us and provide us information as quickly as possible when they have vacancies. Then what we do is we bring these vetted nonprofit partners to the table. We actually provide free listings for them, so they don't have to advertise, incur that expense when they have vacancies. We communicate that to our partners. And then work with us on making sure that once someone's placed, that they stay placed even if they struggle. We then on the provider side execute a similar MOU with them and say, we want you to bring solid case management, that you're going to be on the ground, you're going to be available and accessible if there's an issue related to someone paying rent or following the terms of their lease, that you provide us placement information. When they place somebody at one of our properties, we want to know about that. And so that way we can see where they're going and if they're getting denied and things that we can do to make it easier for them. And so when we outline those expectations, then we can act as an intermediary and facilitate those placements directly, or we can bring a nonprofit and a property together and they can develop their own relationship. And we just act as a conduit.
How does this happen, this meeting of the service providers and the property managers? Is it through automation, or do you send a person out there? I mean, how does it all come about? Yeah,
it's kind of a combination of some automation and really relationship. So I've got, we have a whopping staff of 3 people, myself, and we have a property coordinator who we actually recruited from the property management world. And then we have a placement coordinator who we recruited actually from one of our nonprofit partners who's done case management and program management. And so right now, and up to this point, it's actually been kind of what I call an analog system where we maintain an active list of all of our 120 properties and vacancies on a spreadsheet, and as the needs come across, then we're able to see where there's vacancies and we plug them in. But we've grown a lot. We've grown from 55 properties a year and a half ago to 120, and our goal is 200 by the end of this year. So we have to embrace some technology to make this work seamlessly and quickly. So we have this great partner, RentPath, who manages housing location sites, and they do that for just the general market rentals. And we got connected with them through our board, and they came to us and said, look, we want to build a housing location tool for you for free that your partners can use to help you do your job and make it easier. So they built in 6 weeks an app that also can be accessed from a website, and it helps us manage all of our inventory in real time. What they're also actually working with is working with some of the property management software companies to help us get real-time vacancy information, because right now there's no way to do that except manually. And so they're building this great system for us, and we've actually just launched it last month. And then they're also working with us to develop a system through Salesforce that will help us manage all of that data. And so it's going to become a completely automated process within the next couple months, which we're really excited about. We're trying to really make it from when they get accepted at that agency to when they get housed as short as possible. Our goal is under a week. The challenge with Atlanta is we have 5 different COCs that serve our geography. They all have potentially different coordinated intake and assessment and entry systems that we have to work with. We have close relationships with them to help understand their process and partner with the agencies who do most of the housing in each of those 5 COCs.
Do you see any challenges with a system like yours, working with a coordinated access system like ours in San Diego?
Definitely. So if you think about it, really what we're talking about is 2 different steps in one process. So coordinated access is really focusing on availability within an agency or a program to serve a person or a family. So do they have a slot available to be able to accept this person or family into their program to be able to provide them support, usually a subsidy and some form of case management. So the second step of that is housing. So once someone's in that program, enrolled in that program, where can they find vacant housing that that program then can help them get located into? So the good news is that we're at the early kind of infant stage of development of coordinated access and entry. And so a lot of these systems are actively being built right now. So that's a good opportunity to be able to then sit down with a local group or local government who's also looking at housing inventory to build a system that captures both. When is there a vacancy in a program and where is there a vacancy in an apartment? That's one thing I would recommend is if you've got a great situation, like it sounds like you have in San Diego, is being able to have one COC, one municipality or jurisdiction, one comprehensive system that looks at, here's a person who needs housing, let's assess them, score them, rank them in priority, get them assigned to a program as quickly as possible, and then help that program get that into housing. That's a great system to have that captures all that information at once. If that's not possible, like what we have here in Atlanta, then you have to have flexibility so that those systems can talk to each other. And our partner RentPath has given us pretty much an open system that we can configure and make into anything that we want. And so if, let's say hypothetically, all 5 COCs that serve the metro Atlanta area came together and they developed one coordinated entry system, had one platform that managed all of those availabilities within programs, then we could design our housing location to integrate in with that or to talk to each other because we control it. We control the code and we can modify it and make it whatever we need it to be.
Well, how are you all funded at Open Doors?
Right now, 100% of our funding is privately raised. And so our strategy's been up to this point, and probably in the years to come, is we actually reach out to the real estate community. And we sit down with them and we say, give us units, give us money, or give us both. And so we've been really successful. We've raised over $2 million in the last year and a half, 2 years, and that's given us operation funds for 3 years, and we're working on year 4 and 5 now. What we really pride ourselves on is that the money that's coming in isn't money that's being taken away from another nonprofit. So for instance, we're not applying for grants or funding from local government or state or national government that would normally go to a nonprofit. This is new money coming into the process of getting folks housed who are homeless. What we also do is we take a substantial percentage of that funding and we pass it on directly to the nonprofits. So we have capacity building grants that we give them to be able to use unrestricted funds to just help increase housing stability. So we might give a $20,000 grant to a partner of ours to be able to supplement some of their HUD funding that doesn't cover furniture, or might help pay for someone who's fallen behind on their rent. Maybe they placed them 3 months ago, they got a cut in hours, so they needed a couple months more support than their grant would normally supply. We also use the majority of our funding to actually create what we call a risk reserve. We have a program called a rent guarantee that we're starting up soon that will create a 12-month rent guarantee for any Open Doors placement. Local United Way agency came in, placed someone in an apartment. 6 months into their placement, their case management and their housing subsidy has ended because it was short-term in nature. That family finds themselves in a place where they can no longer afford that rent. We try everything we can. We actually also have a temporary financial assistance fund where we can come in and pay their rent if they have exhausted all of their other means of support to help keep them housed. But let's just say it's just not a good situation, the property needs to evict, or the family's decided to maybe end the lease early. That rent guarantee will kick in and cover 2 months or an equivalent of about $1,500 worth of rent while we then refill that unit. That provides some financial security for our property partners in that if for some reason a placement fails, they know they're not going to be out that revenue. And that's really important for us maintaining a good relationship with them. And it mitigates some of that risk that's inherent in working within this field. Our funding, we try to keep our operational expense as small as possible, which is why we have 3 staff, and I'm always telling them, we need to work smarter, not harder. 3 of us, we've been able to really help a lot of our nonprofit partners make a lot of placements.
Sounds like it's a good thing for the landlords.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea is we want to make it an easy yes for them. I've probably pitched our program and a partnership with us to about 30 companies since I've started, and I have yet to have a company say no. And most of our property partners who give us units also contribute financially to our program.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
If we were going to hire somebody like you in San Diego, what kind of skills would we be looking for?
Someone who's definitely worked within the field, who understands how a supportive housing program works, knows how HUD funding works. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through and a lot of regulations you have to adhere to. I think having that experience is critical. Also having someone who's really worked on the ground, who knows the challenges of, I've got an individual I'm working with, I need to find a unit as quickly as possible with limited funds. How do I do that? I think having that knowledge enhances this process a lot. We've talked with groups in Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, Miami, New York, and Denver, and there are a lot of groups who are trying and want to replicate what we've done here. And so I think bringing in somebody who can understand the housing process and the nonprofit side of things, but also quickly learn what it's like to work within the real estate world is important. I've had to change how I talk. A lot of the things that I would say if I'm doing fundraising for a program, I can't say necessarily, or I wouldn't say to somebody who I'm pitching as far as a property partner. Their time is very limited, and you have to get in there and in 20 minutes and say, here's how this makes sense from a business perspective, and here's what you can do to help also from a philanthropic perspective. I think for me, what's been helpful is I have a great board through the Real Estate Collaborative. Like I said, men and women who sometimes work as hard at this job and supporting Open Doors as they do their own jobs. And so that's critical. But then also the partnerships on the nonprofit side are equally as important. Again, we don't house individuals and families, our partners do. We just want to make it easier for them to do that. And so it's all about relationship. If you were creating this position in San Diego or another market, it's somebody who understands but also can build strong relationships on both sides of the table.
I know the board is very important in making all of this happen. What is their role in this?
So they're the ones who make or break the program. They're the ones who create the relationships and opportunities for us to partner with these management companies and ownership groups. As a licensed clinical social worker, they've never heard of me, they don't know who I am, they don't know who Open Doors is as an agency or a program, and so our board come from that world. They're the executives, the principals in these management groups and ownership groups, and so they, no pun intended, literally open the door for us to be able to get in the room and to be able to say, this is who we are, we would love to partner with you, we'd love to be able to help you fill your vacancies, give you some assurances on rent. Our board really come together and make those connections. They've worked with a lot of these other executives in other aspects of their careers. They socialize with them, they have these great relationships. And so, if I call up Aaron, my board chair, and say, hey, we have this company who has 5 or 6 complexes in their portfolio, could you facilitate an introduction? And he calls them up, and the next day we're at a lunch. And having a connection to us through a relationship that's already established gives them a little bit of confidence that we're not just asking something from them, but not willing to give them something in return. Our board is also, they're wonderful fundraisers. They know when to ask and who to ask and what to ask. And so we're not putting a burden too much on our property partners to give us more money than they can or that we need. And so they do a great job at strategizing ways to keep our funding going and also just develop us, to grow us as an agency, as an independent nonprofit, that it will be around for a while to be able to help our nonprofit partners find more housing.
And what are some of the challenges you faced?
Probably inventory is the biggest challenge right now. What we've seen is over 90% of all of the new development or redevelopment of properties is luxury. And so the housing market has bounced back from the recession substantially enough that there's a lot of renovation happening. There's a lot of sales of complexes and properties. What we're seeing is that properties that used to be affordable are now getting tiered up and are outside of the rent price point that a lot of our families and individuals and nonprofits can afford. So dwindling inventory is a huge issue. Our average partner or complex are at above 90% in occupancy. We're also seeing an increase in rent prices, like I said, anywhere from 15 to 25%. And the rent price increase is outpacing the increase in the fair market rent as determined by Hurd. And so we're being priced out of a lot of complexes that we weren't priced out of 2 years ago. That also with the risk of potentially federal funding being cut for housing and urban development, and also in general cuts across the board to human services. That's a huge issue for us. Any reduction in funding, which is already pretty low, could be devastating. We've got to get even more creative than we have been at finding more units. The City of Atlanta is working with the Regional Commission on Homelessness and United Way on a project called Homestretch. They're looking at putting $50 million into ending homelessness in Atlanta, in Metro Atlanta. And that would be a huge benefit to our efforts to try to get those 4,500 folks who are still on the street housed.
We were just in Seattle and we heard about you from them. And what kind of a national attention are you getting from this?
So we were recognized by Hurd a few years ago as a best practice and kind of an innovative approach to increasing affordable housing. So I think that got us some attention, and we've actually presented at a couple of national conferences. We went out to Los Angeles for the Housing First Partners Conference and presented there. We've gotten some great attention for our early success and a very different approach. It's a good thing and a challenging thing in that it's great to be recognized, but it's a challenge in that you want to live up to the hype. And so one of the things that we're always trying to do is to say each city is different. It's unique in its construct and its demographics and its financial development and level of engagement from local government. And what we built here works great for Metro Atlanta, but we would love, and it's part of our plan to help other communities replicate what we're doing and help them adapt what we've created with the Real Estate Collaborative and with Open Doors in other markets. So I think there's a lot of potential for that, and we would love to, we're always willing to talk with anyone and to be a part of consulting, and we've really enjoyed working with Seattle and King County to come together and help them start building something that works for them.